They'll hang me for this.
Not while I have the power to prevent it, monsieur.
Was Hercule Poirot based on a real person? And if so, who was he at the end of the day? Surely these questions pop into the mind of every reader of the fabulous series of the detective crime novels written by Agatha Christie in the mid-20th century. True masterpieces of the genre, these texts and their quirky protagonists have quickly become evergreen crowd favorites on bookshelves, on stage, on TV and in the movies, and seem to have never lost their popularity ever since.
You're probably working on some other book now, madame. Set in Egypt, perhaps?
How thrillingly clever of you to deduce that, Monsieur Porridge.
The Mysteries of Mystery, the Queen of Crime, or the Duchess of Death for fascinated readers, Missus and Nima for the dearest and nearest, Dame Agatha Mary Clarissa Christie Lady Malone is by far the most celebrated female detective genre writer who managed to make her fictional characters stand out from the book pages and almost live their own lives outside of their initial frames. Yet, could it be that Christie didn't just invent Poirot, or Poirot, as they used to pronounce his francophone surname in English?
Poirot, monsieur. Hercule Poirot.
Poirot. Could never get my tongue around French.
But I am Belgian, monsieur, not French.
In fact, Agatha Christie Malone did shed some light on this intriguing part of the character's creation herself. It was while I was working in the dispensary that I first conceived the idea of writing a detective story. She writes in her autobiography, by the way, an extremely captivating reading. I highly recommend it to you to unwind, brighten up the spirit and spend some hours of leisure talking to Mrs. Christie herself. Back to the story. Imagine this picture. The First World War is in full swing. Agatha is a young and joyful 20-something girl whose head is obviously engaged with all the romantic things a proper Victorian girl should be thinking of at this age, like country house parties, riding, hunting, dances and roller skating. And she's also carrying her duty of helping her country and its soldiers defending it. She works days and nights as a nurse at the local hospital and then moves on to the job at its dispensary unit, where they made drugs and prepared some complicated medical potions, mixing often dangerous substances to achieve the desired healing outcome. I was surrounded by poisons. Perhaps it was natural that death by poisoning should be the method I selected.
Do you not find it peculiar, Inspector, that this calculating murderer should be discovered with this very bottle of poison in his pocket?
She also has an additional motivation, the challenge to write a detective story proposed by her elder sister Madge, who was a decent author herself on her own merit, that Agatha naively accepted. "I don't think you could do it," said Madge. "They are very difficult to do. I've thought about it." "I should like to try." "Well, I bet you couldn't," said Madge. The words had been said, and now there was a favorable opportunity to prove the elder sister wrong. There would naturally have to be a detective. At that date, I was well steeped into the Sherlock Holmes tradition, so I considered detectives. Not like Sherlock Holmes, of course, I must invent one of my own, and he would also have a friend as a kind of butt or stooge. That would not be too difficult. Christie was thinking of Sherlock, the French criminal and detective in one person, Arsène Lupin, and several others, when suddenly an idea came to her head.
Yes, let's make a little pause to freshen la toilette. And to rest the little grey cells.
Then I remembered of Belgian refugees. We had quite a colony of Belgian refugees living at the parish of Tours. A good many of them were suspicious peasants, and the last thing they wanted was to be asked out to tea or have people drop in upon them. They wanted to be left alone and to be able to keep to themselves. They wanted to save money, to dig their garden and to manure it in their own particular and intimate way. Why not make my detective a Belgian? she thought.
You're not selling onions, are you?
Pardon?
Your people come over here doing that a lot.
There were all types of refugees. How about a refugee police officer, a retired police officer, not a younger one?
Superintendent Boucher, one moment if you please. Chantalier and myself, we would be very happy to investigate further the Derola case.
Although she later regretted making Poirot this mature, even old, right from the beginning. In The Mysterious Affair at Styles, set in about 1916 to 1920, we learn that Poirot retired at the age of 55 in 1905. So already in the first book, Poirot is somewhere in his late 60s.
She has kindly extended her hospitality to 7 of my country people who are refugees from our native land.
What a mistake I made there! The result is that my fictional detective must really be well over 100 by now. A couple of books later, Christie recognized this misfortune and never spoke about his age again.
You got it wrong, you bloody little frog!
Firstly, I am not a bloody little frog. I am a bloody little Belgian.
Anyway, this is how she personally remembers the creation and the real-life prototypes of Poirot. I settled on a Belgian detective. I allowed him slowly to grow into his part. He should have been an inspector, so he would have a certain knowledge of crime. He would be meticulous, very tidy, I thought to myself, as I cleared away a good many untidy odds and ends in my own bedroom. I could see him as a tidy little man, always arranging things like things in pairs, like things square instead of round, and he should be very brainy, should have little grey cells of the mind. That phrase she particularly liked and was happy about. In some of the books she would later specify that he spent his childhood years in or near the town of Spa, the quiet retreat in Ardennes in Belgium. He must have come from a large yet not so wealthy family and had at least one younger sister. Amusingly, the citizens of another Belgian village of Elzel in the province of Hainaut somehow decided that Poirot has been born there, and although Christie has never mentioned that anywhere in her texts, they even have a copy of Poirot's birth certificate in a local memorial attesting Poirot's birth, naming his father and mother as Jules-Louis Poirot and Godelieve Poirot. What a devotion, isn't it?
Abduction, addiction, adultery, see also under marriage, bigamy, see also under marriage, bonds.
See also under marriage?
When it comes to the name, there are numerous suggestions out there on the internet of how she actually came out with it. Christie herself noted that she was indeed in search of something original. He would have rather a grand name, one of those names that Sherlock Holmes and his family had, like Mycroft Holmes, Sherlock's brother, for example, or Enola from the recent series.
Oh! Apologies, madame. I meant no disrespect.
Oh, you could try to mean a little.
Well, she was apparently looking for some catchy contrast or controversy that would stick in the reader's mind. How about calling my little man Hercules, a name of a giant, a god attached to a small man? How do you like it? Christie remembered that the search for the last name was more difficult. I don't know why I settled on the name Poirot. Whether it just came to my head, or whether I saw it in some newspaper or written on something, anyway, it came. At that point, she decisively omitted the last S from Poirot's name, transforming it to the appropriate equivalent, Hercule, suitable for the Belgian detective. There was another childhood recollection of Christie that sheds light on some famous traits of the eccentric detective. Mother read me Dickens aloud, and we both enjoyed it. Our first Dickens was Nicholas Nickleby, and my favorite character was the old gentleman who courted Mrs. Nickleby by throwing vegetable marrows over the wall. Can this be one of the reasons why I made Hercule Poirot retire to grow vegetable marrows? Who can say? The rather disturbing seasickness was another personal trait of Christie that she shared with the Belgian detective.
Don't you think that human beings tend to reproduce certain patterns, Mr. Poirot? Stereotyped patterns?
Précisément, mademoiselle.
Few details about Poirot's personal life would be revealed in the future books, apart from the rather vague idea of his work as the chief of police of Brussels until the Great War forced him to leave for England. And although this man has never existed in real life, people kept saying they've certainly seen the prototype. For example, one genealogist in Torquay, the town in Devon where Christie spent her childhood years, well, he was sure he might have found the real deal. He dropped the name of Jacques Ornay, a retired Belgian gendarme who fled the war and settled in the community of refugee Belgians in Torquay. Monsieur Ornay was reportedly present at a charity event organized in the town to raise money and clothing for Belgian refugees, and a young girl played the piano there. And the girl turned out to be Agatha Christie, who must have remembered the guy. Although this proves nothing, it is indeed looking like a fancy coincidence.
Oh, Mr. Poirot, how pleased I am to see you.
Moreover, Christie herself noted that twice in her life she saw Hercule Poirot, once lunching in the Savoy and once on a boat in the Canary Islands. The character of Hercule Poirot became quite a success in the writer's own words, right from the first novel, The Mysterious Affair at Styles. No wonder that Agatha Christie continued to employ him for 55 years. As a result, Poirot became the leading character of 33 novels, 2 plays, and more than 50 short stories. Interestingly, he became living his own life right from his first appearance over 100 years ago in 1920. Much to Christie's protest, editors of various publications and stage and movie directors often added their own twist to his looks and personality. Much rarely, in some cases, those interpretations turned out to be right to the point. For example, the editor of the famous and popular sketch weekly journal commissioned Christie to come up with a series of detective short stories. She remembered, he also had a fancy drawing made of Hercule Poirot, which was not unlike my idea of him, though he was depicted as a little smarter and more aristocratic than I had envisaged him. Interestingly, my favorite and I believe the best ever incarnation of Poirot, performed by the great David Suchet, is also inclining towards this flair of sophisticated manners with a twist of peculiarity and irresistible power of intellect. They say that David Suchet was recommended for the part by Christie's family, who had seen his theatre performance. I have to tell you, I think my mother would have been very proud. Rosalind Hicks, Christie's only daughter, once said to Suchet in private,
"How is the sleuthing going? With eminence and discretion? No one to put the hand grips on?"
Not yet.
Yet that isn't the case for every Poirot portrayal. It always seems strange to me that whoever plays Poirot is always an outsized man, recalled Christie. The great British actor Peter Ustinov immediately comes to my mind. He did 6 episodes from the series from the late 1970s to the late 1980s, to the rather plausible critical acclaim. And Kenneth Branagh from the recent movie remakes of Murder on the Orient Express, Death on the Nile, and soon some third film based on a lesser-known work, definitely makes it into the top 3 most accurate and deep portrayals of the detective on screen. In the next video, we'll have a look at all Hercule Poirot actors and choose the best fit for the role. Subjectively, of course.
Stamps, please.
Very good, sir.
Hastings?
Good Lord. Monsieur Poirot!
It is indeed mon ami Hastings!
And how about Captain Hastings? Could it be that he had a particular inspiration from the epoch? In her autobiography, Christie said that although she particularly enjoyed Hastings, he was still a stereotyped creation that perfectly fit into his and Poirot's detective team. I was still working in the Sherlock Holmes tradition, eccentric detective, stooge assistant with illustrated type, Scotland Yard detective, Inspector Japp, and now I added human foxhound, Inspector Giraud of the French police. Giraud despises Poirot as being old and passé. She recalled the thought process for the famous murder of the Lynx, which was in fact based on a real-life case. I'll tell its story in one of the future videos.
I can build a house of cards 7 stories high by placing one card on top of another with a mathematical precision. But I cannot find the last link in this so mysterious case.
Anyways, even authors grew tired of their own creations. Christie mentioned that she even wanted to marry Hastings, the sooner the better, and this way get rid of him, at least for a while. She eventually got bothered by Poirot too, and already in the 1930s found him insufferable, and by the 1960s called him an eccentric creep. Perhaps this attitude was fueled by her continuous efforts to keep his personality the way she intended, with numerous theater and movie directors tried to change his character and appearance this or that way to make him younger, prettier or funnier to suit the tastes of the public, well, as they daringly saw it.
God damn you. What have you done?
What have I done? It is you who have deceived me!
No wonder Dame Agatha Christie has never cared much for cinema or for wireless and television and remained that proper Victorian girl up to the last days of her fruitful life. The characters she created made her the best-selling novelist in history. Eventually, they went far beyond the written text and keep inspiring new takes on them in movies and TV and even in books by new authors. Poirot even became the first fictional character to have an obituary in the New York Times, following the publication of The Curtain, the last novel about this detective where he dies, which happened the same year Agatha Christie passed away herself.
I tell you that I, Salome Otterbull, have succeeded where frail men have faltered. I am a finer sleuth than even the great Hercule Poirot.
Mrs. Otterborn, for God's sake, calm down.
David Suchet is Hercule Poirot came alive. No, forget about Suchet. Kenneth Branagh is the new master of the genre. Wait a minute, and what about the marvelous Peter Ustinov? Well, in fact, there were way more actors who tried their best to portray the most famous Agatha Christie's character. In today's episode, we will look at all of them and award the title of the best Poirot out there on screens.
At last, at the end of my career, I had come across the perfect criminal. Well, nearly perfect.
Well, a small correction here. Agatha Christie continued to employ Poirot for 55 years. As a result, he became the leading character of 33 novels, 2 plays and 50 short stories. This way, since the late 1920s, the Belgian eccentric detective has been reimagined and depicted on stage, screen and radio by over 40 actors. Obviously, it would be impossible to pay due attention to all of them in this video, yet you'll still get a pretty good idea of how his likeness evolved in movies and TV series over all these years.
You see, I know all I tell you.
Now look, I will not take that pushing me, I'll bargain.
Let's begin with the order of precedence. The first screen portrayal of Poirot came in the form of an Irish actor, Austin Trevor, who played his part in 3 British films: Alibi in Black Coffee in 1931 and Lord Edgware Dies in 1934. Alibi producer and director turned the character into a typical 30s sleuth. Like, could you imagine Monsieur Poirot without his famous moustache? In addition, it is believed that Trevor claimed that he was cast because he could do a great French accent.
Monsieur Poirot, I believe.
At your service, Lady Adrienne.
Oh, you Frenchmen are so cute. I just love your Parisian manners.
Belgian.
Monsieur Poirot, I've just got to get rid of my husband.
But, Madame, getting rid of husbands is not my speciality.
No wonder that Agatha Christie could have raised her eyebrows at such daring liberty by the film director, and then bitterly suffer each time she saw just another frivolous incarnation of her character. The next milestone of Poirot's journey on screens was his appearance in the first adaptation of Murder on the Orient Express, where the Belgian detective was played by an English actor, Albert Finney. It was released in 1974 when the actor was just 38 years old. Well, that was quite a digression from the author's idea, since Christie's character has begun his detective track record on British soil somewhere in his late 60s. They say that everyone understood that Albert Finney was perhaps too young to play Poirot. But eventually he was chosen, regardless of that tiny detail, since they decided that he could be made up to resemble an older detective.
Not now. When it's all over, when it's behind us, then.
When what was all over, Miss Deborah?
The official website of Agatha Christie says that his metamorphosis required Finney many hours of makeup to become Poirot. Every morning of filming, the actor would be picked up from his house in an ambulance, where he would sleep, and the makeup artist would begin their work on the transformation. The process would then continue in the studio, where he would remain asleep, as well as having a false nose to achieve a short, soaring-looking body. Finney wore body padding in the form of a t-shirt draped with cotton wool.
Pardon me, sir. I wonder if you could oblige me with a light.
Certainly.
Thank you. My name is Ratchet. Do I have the pleasure of speaking to Mr. Hercule Poirot?
Pleasure, possibly, Mr. Ratchet. The intention, certainly. You asked me for a light. I offered you one, and you have not used it. One can't deduce that without acute mental exhaustion.
Well, he looks pretty old in the end, don't you think? Not 60, of course, yet not 38 either. And here again was the problem with the moustache. Right, it is present, but is it gorgeous enough? Agatha Christie didn't think so. I wrote that my detective had the finest moustache in England, but he didn't in the film. I thought that was a pity. Why shouldn't he have the best moustache? She reckoned after watching the movie, which in other parts was much to her liking. No wonder, the cast is unbeatable.
Ladies and gentlemen, you're in distinguished company. Moreover, you're in dangerous company.
The film received 6 Oscar nominations, including a nomination for Albert Finney for Best Actor as Poirot, and a win for Ingrid Bergman as Supporting Actress for playing Greta. And now there was the first long-standing Poirot, played by the celebrated British actor Peter Ustinov. He did 6 episodes from the series from the late 1970s to the late 1980s, to the rather plausible critical acclaim, and received the unofficial title of the Charming Poirot.
Lucky? With me, it's the exercise of the little grey cells. Luck, I leave to the others.
Yes, I'd forgotten your opinions about yourself.
Some say that his impersonation of the sleuth was totally different from the young Poirot, partly to avoid the judgment that he was copying his predecessor. Ustinov paid much more attention to detail in Christie's character. His keen insight obviously came from his own foreign origins. His parents and grandparents came from Russian noble roots and artistic circles, so he was perfectly aware of the depicted time, life, circumstances and traditions of the members of the epoch society. By his acting method, Ustinov dived deep into Poirot's personality and as a result referred to the role as exhausting, explaining that Poirot is so terribly accurate and tidy in his mind and habits, so meticulous.
I wish you to consider very carefully a bathing cap. a bath, a bottle, a wristwatch, the diamond, the noonday gun, the breath of the sea, and the height of the cliff.
Ustinov Poirot almost crossed paths with the next actor who was recommended for the part by Christie's family, who had seen his theater performance before. David Suchet is an English actor of Jewish-Russian origin who was destined to become a real Belgian on screen for 70 episodes and 13 seasons of Agatha Christie's Poirot on ITV between 1989 and 2013.
An animal attraction, would you think, Mr. Poirot? Well, 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 things are looking up.
Now, indeed, wouldn't you agree that when you read Poirot books now, you immediately imagine no one else's face but the one of Suchet?
I also wish there were someone else I could trust. But I suppose I will have to put up with you.
And that iconic soundtrack for the series became sort of a trademark of the detective stories, watched by over 700 million viewers in over 100 countries worldwide. The actor attributes his popularity in portraying Poirot to the attention to detail that he paid to the personal eccentricities that Christie described in her novels. Agatha Christie's website tells that each day before filming, Suchet would read through his list of character notes, which contained over 90 traits of the sleuth, to help him get into Poirot's mindset. The notes ranged from highlighting Poirot's passion for tidiness to the fact that he hates golf. Although Christie didn't have a fact to see his acting performance, I think she would have been happy with the result. I have to tell you, my mother would have been very proud. Rosalind Hicks, Christie's only daughter, once said to Suchet in private.
You will not have realized, Hastings, that recently I have taken to wearing the false moustache. Even Georges does not know that.
Getting back to Peter Ustinov. In fact, they did cross paths with David Suchet in one of Christie's TV adaptations. Did you know that in the 13 at Dinner episode from 1985, Ustinov plays Poirot while Suchet appears on screen as no one else but Inspector Japp?
Ah, Japp. What brings you out so early?
Early? I've been up for hours on business, murder.
This is absolutely mind-blowing to even think of, right?
You actually spoke to Lady Edgware?
No, I've seen her, but she won't say a word without a solicitor. Until he shows up, my men are staying right on top of her. In a manner of speaking.
I guess everyone could imagine how hard could it be to make a new attempt on something that was done before with a huge success already. However, each epoch witnesses new takes on the role of the famous detective. Why not, right? It all keeps these captivating stories from the beautiful epoch of the 1930s alive. Anyway, British actor and filmmaker Kenneth Branagh wasn't afraid to present his own version of Hercule Poirot of the 21st century. He began his journey in his role with the evergreen blockbuster Murder on the Orient Express in 2017, which became a box office success that grossed a worldwide total of over $350 million against a production budget of $55 million.
You're the world-famous detective, Hercule Poirot. Avenger of the innocent. Is that what they call you in the papers?
And you are innocent?
You're fun.
He then strengthened his success this year in 2022 with the release of another crowd favorite story, The Death on the Nile, which received mixed yet still mostly positive reviews worldwide. Have you watched it already? I haven't, so I'll be happy if you share your recommendations in the comments.
What did you do last night?
You accused me of murder.
He accuses everyone of murder. It is a problem, I admit.
And now they say there's going to be the third movie in production. The title is not revealed, yet they say it's going to be based on a lesser-known story. Well, that's even more exciting, isn't it?
You will arrest me now?
No. So long as you settle her affairs honestly and pay back what you owe.
Critics generally praise Branagh's impersonation of Poirot. He shared that in order to prepare better, he read all of the Poirot novels in chronological order, starting with the first edition of The Mysterious Affair at Styles, listened to the recordings of 27 different Belgian accents by the gentleman of Poirot's age speaking in English, and met with a dialect coach 3 times a week to study and practice Poirot's accent. Was that enough? Well, it's up to us to judge.
May you find your peace with this. May we all.
In between the trailblazing Austin Trevor and the most recent Kenneth Branagh, there were a number of other interesting Poirots. An English actor, Alfred Molina, played Poirot in a single episode, which was once again based on the murder on the Orient Express. I know it is a great subject, but come on, is there anything else worth of film director's attention?
Poirot? Oh, forgive me.
The screenplay was heavily modified, taking 2 hour time, and had a smaller cast than the novel. Not surprisingly, the film was poorly received. It was clearly inferior to the original of 1974 with Albert Finney, and sadly added nothing new to the perception of this drama.
I recognized you from that TV show. What'd they call you? Don't tell me. Super Detective.
Sleuth Supreme.
Oh yeah, Sleuth Supreme.
Another great actor, John Malkovich, put on the head of Hercule Poirot in the 2018 BBC adaptation of the ABC Murders, co-starring Rupert Grint as Inspector Crome. I've read all kinds of reviews. Some of them praised Malkovich's performance, and some said that he almost totally flopped. I won't lie, I haven't seen him in the role, yet the fact that his Poirot wears a beard rather than moustache is something against the hair for me. There was another impersonation that caught my attention thanks to the subject rather than the actor. In 1986, a great English actor, Ian Holm, was starring in the television film Murder by the Book. According to the plot, Poirot confronts Agatha Christie about killing him off in her novel, Curtain. Poirot visits Christie and tries to take over the manuscript before it is published and kills his literal legacy. Now that's something original, right? The actor looks rather convincing too, so I definitely put it on my watch list.
How dare you keep bingo like that?
Obviously, there were several other English-speaking actors and quite a few international takes on the role of the Belgian detective. Perhaps you have watched some of them and could share your opinion. I'd be curious to read about your watching experience in the comments.
But only, of course, as far as the dictates of honor will allow.
So, out of those 8 Poirots, which one would make the top 3? What would you say? My personal choice is this. So far, I award the latest Kenneth Branagh bronze medal. Perhaps when I watch Death on the Nile and the 3rd movie, he get that chance to be moved 1 step ahead, but that won't be easy. The silver medal goes to Peter Ustinov. Moreover, I dare say that his Death on the Nile is my favorite, and I prefer him to Suchet in this particular episode. Obviously, the overall cast is simply gorgeous there. Maggie Smith, Angela Lansbury, Mia Farrow, Jane Birkin, David Niven and others. An irresistible ensemble of actors. Oh, I digress. And the winner is... Alright, the canvas sensation here, it is always one and only, the perfect Hercule Poirot in my eyes. David Suchet. Would you agree with this rating? Or what would be your top pick? That the Poirot series producers knocked out the detective's sidekick, Captain Hastings, and his secretary, Miss Lemon, from the show in the last seasons. And this is not what Agatha Christie planned for these characters. In this video, we shall look at what happened to Poirot's beloved supporting characters, both in TV series and in real life, in the books.
It's a shame you've never considered marriage, Mr. Poirot.
There were occasions, Miss Lemon, when I did have la tentation, the temptation. But now, alas, I think it is too late.
Would you agree that although David Suchet made a masterful job of portraying the best Poirot ever, it would have never been the same without his trusted friends and assistants?
No, you must be my eyes and my nose.
Ears.
Wait, to see and observe in my place.
Right, you can count on me.
In fact, it was Captain Hastings who first appears in the storyline and introduces us to Hercule Poirot, both in the pages of the mysterious affair at Styles and the eponymous episode.
Yes, Madame Lady, but you...
Half a dozen stamps, please.
Very good, sir.
Hastings?
Good Lord. Monsieur Poirot!
It is indeed mon ami Hastings!
Captain Arthur Hastings is a lifelong friend, confidant, chronicle and roommate throughout their lives. Interestingly, Hugh Fraser, who portrayed Hastings in the series, was certain that the relationship between Poirot and Hastings is a walking relationship, that Poirot actually employs him, which would explain why Hastings is constantly around Poirot's flat.
You will have to make up your mind, Hastings.
Well, I'm going to. Tomorrow's the last day. I've got it marked in my diary. It says, decide about car.
In her autobiography, Christie said that although she particularly enjoyed Hastings, he was still a stereotyped creation that perfectly fit into his and Poirot's detective team, which she modeled on that of Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson. His lack of common sense complements Poirot's precision perfectly, and their friendship is one of the brightest highlights of this fictional realm. All in all, Hastings is featured in 8 Poirot novels, 21 short stories and 1 play. In other words, the character was a constant in Poirot's life for only 7 years and an intermittent companion for 12 more years after that. Even Hugh Fraser once pointed out that Hastings wasn't in very many of the books. In fact, he was put in stories that he wasn't in, as were Japp and Miss Lemon. Let's find out why. At first, Hastings was a nice tool for Christie, which she used to shape the character of the Belgian sleuth. He had wild, unpredictable imagination, which often pointed Poirot in the direction of unexpected conclusions about the case.
Oh, the kidnapping business, you mean? Yes, I had a word with Mrs. Waverley about that. I don't think there's too much to worry about.
That's very reassuring, Hastings. Thank you. But we must not try to walk before we can jump, eh?
At the same time, Agatha confessed that she couldn't imagine her Poirot becoming so popular that she would have to write stories about him for 50 years. The character of Hastings quickly became rather daunting to her, so she decided to get rid of him rather quickly, at least for a while, and made him fall in love, marry, and live for Argentina for the good. According to Christie, he was about 30 years old when we first meet him at Styles. Poirot was supposed to be much older. However, in reality, Fraser and Suchet were almost the same age during filming. In fact, Hugh Fraser is actually 1 year older than Suchet. Amazing, right? They've made a super job of Hastings looking much younger than his Belgian friend.
But there is a quality in Lady Edgwell that is most attractive. Do you not think, Hastings?
Oh, don't tell me you're falling for her.
No, Hastings. Poirot, he does not fall. He observes merely.
Through the course of the plot line, we learn that Hastings had studied at Eton College, enjoys everything related to cars, racing and golf, he's brave and somewhat naive, is attracted to women and at the same time remains an English gentleman to the last detail.
Ah, Hastings. You've bought your car?
Bought and paid for.
Quite a light-hearted and rather likable character, isn't it? And although he apparently leaves his wife and 4 children in Argentina and returns to England alone, Christie wasn't much eager to bring him back to the scene next to Poirot.
Welcome home, Captain Hastings.
Miss Lemon.
Amusingly, the series producers decided to follow her path no matter that his character became extremely popular among the public in larger part thanks to the stunning portrayal by Hugh Fraser, who once confessed that he had never seen any of the previous interpretations before they started shooting, because he wanted his Hastings to be something quite original. There is a chemistry between us all from the word go. After 12 years, the rights were sold to a new production company and they wanted a film noir feeling, which isn't in the books, and guest stars. Another series star, Pauline Moran, who played Miss Lemon, shed some light on that when the series came to an end in 2013. Her Miss Felicity Lemon, Poirot's no-nonsense secretary, became another gem of the crowd-favorite series. Indeed, she was a complete antipode of Hastings. Efficient, disciplined and direct, she had no interest in crime fiction, preferring facts and order over frivolity. And her attempt to create the perfect filing system for Poirot's cases might become a perfect ad for some courses on improving organizational skills.
Abduction, addiction, adultery, see also under marriage. Bigamy, see also under marriage. Bonds,
see also under marriage.
Pauline Moran, who brilliantly portrays Miss Lemon in the TV series, said that Miss Lemon is a reflection of Poirot, in that she has the same fastidiousness and obsession with detail and precision. Poirot described her as being unbelievably ugly and incredibly efficient. Anything that she mentioned as worth consideration usually was worth consideration. Poor Miss Lemon. Well, thanks to the brilliant Pauline Moran, she's definitely not ugly at all. She is actually quite an attractive, fashionable and emotional woman, showing an occasional soft spot for Poirot.
I'm afraid I'm going to have to overhaul the entire system. And the posters come.
Alas, Agatha Christie didn't share much about Lemon, as she only features in 4 Poirot novels and 4 short stories. Well, she's a middle-class working woman who is independent and earns her own money, although she mentions from time to time that Poirot doesn't pay her that well. We do know that she visits her mother now and then. She apparently has a widowed sister, Mrs. Florence Hubbard, who appears in the Hickory-Dickory Dock. In the series, there is only one rare occasion when we see her being involved in a short love affair, where a man is trying to deceive her.
This is Mr. Graves.
How do you do?
How do you do? I was just saying to Monsieur Poirot how much I envy you all, the exciting business you're in.
Well, you know. Please.
The script writers of Agatha Christie's Poirot went the extra mile to spice up Lemon's character. We learned that she has some attraction to magic and spiritualism, adores reading tarot cards, practices hypnotism, and otherwise tries to communicate with the spirit world.
Hastings, what means this with the planchette?
Oh, we're just fooling around. It's interesting, though. We think this could be from King Men-Hurrah.
Hastings, please pull yourself together. We have business to which we must attend.
Perhaps this inclination was a nod to Pauline Moran, who, apart from being an actress, describes herself as an astrologer. Anyways, Miss Lemon is delighted when Mr. Poirot returns from Egypt and brings a small cat sculpture as a gift for her.
I don't know how you can tell her such guff, Poirot.
No, Hastings, it is not a guff. The power of superstition. It is a power that is very great indeed.
And what about Japp, Christie's ferret-faced, as she put it, Chief Inspector James Harold Japp was actually being alongside Poirot for the longest time possible, appearing in a variety of intriguing cases.
Your name is Ascanio?
Yes.
I want to ask you a few questions, Mr. Ascanio.
About what?
Never mind the clever talk. Where's the money?
Alas, in the books, Agatha didn't elaborate on his character much, so it's again thanks to the stunning actor from the series, Philip Jackson, that we grew so fond of his Chief Inspector. Interestingly, he stated that he deliberately didn't do any research when he took on the role. I don't believe that reading Agatha Christie's books is particularly useful for doing the series. Well, she was good at plot and ideas, Christie wasn't that good at fleshing out her characters. The only thing I remember reading about Inspector Japp is that his hobby is botany. He has an amazing knowledge of plants and collects specimens and sticks them in books. I didn't find this at all useful to the way I wanted to play the part, so consequently it doesn't figure in my performance. According to Christie's ideas, Japp was meant to take place of Lestrade against brilliant Sherlock, sort of a mere juxtaposition of someone dumb against someone clever.
Monsieur Waverley felt that Scotland Yard was not convinced about the seriousness of the case.
So he came to you, Mr. Poirot?
Monsieur Waverley is a man of fine judgment and intelligence.
Luckily with Japp, that didn't become so straightforward. There's an unmistakable sense of mutual respect and even friendship between two of them. Christie didn't specify whether Japp was married, and the addition of the comic out-of-screen anecdotes about his wife's personality in the series added another interesting touch to the character of Chief Inspector as a sort of antagonist of Poirot.
You see, my Emily, she just doesn't understand my work. She never lets me talk about murder at the dinner table. And her tidying, it just gets worse and worse. Sometimes I wonder how I've managed to live with her these 27.5 years.
The actor gave an amazing insight into his character in one of the interviews. In the 1930s, the job of Scotland Yard detective was seen as being quite a low status. Today we tend to glamorize television detectives because they earn enormous salaries, drive around in flashy cars, and have a rather elevated status in society. In those days, it was very much a tough life, investigating crimes of a rather distasteful nature. It was considered not a very good way to spend one's time, but Japp is a man with a purpose, and you can sense his disapproval of the more privileged members of society. He always gets very sniffy of people who seem to earn a lot of money with very little effort.
Bonjour, Chief Inspector. How did you sleep?
I didn't.
So, albeit the producers dropped the characters in the last seasons, except for the key final episodes, they went far beyond Christie's own ideas and greatly expanded them for the television series. After Philip and Hugh and I did Evil Under the Sun, we were shown the door, and they didn't include us in the storylines. I've mixed feelings about that, but I'm pleased they've caught up with us in the final series and given the chance to say goodbye to those characters, said Moran. Indeed, together they conveyed the sense of continuity, being sort of a family for Poirot, creating a feeling of warmth and familiarity for us, viewers. And how do you feel about them? Hope to discuss it in the comments.
Miss Lemon, Edwin has been arrested.
Edwin.
Yes, Monsieur Graves.
Good. It's about time.
Do you believe in witches?
It's Halloween for young and old!
Did you know that Agatha Christie included her own self in several of her detective mysteries? Well, it wasn't a proper cameo, yet she almost certainly embedded many of her personal traits in the fabulous recurring character of Ariadne Oliver, a fictional detective writer who was assisting Hercule Poirot in solving some of the most challenging mysteries.
Thank you, Hercule.
In this episode, we will go to a Halloween party together with the beloved characters and uncover several curious real-life connections that Christie left for us in her novels.
It is time for Poirot to tell to you a story. A Halloween story.
Many of you watched at least some of the Poirot series episodes that feature an esteemed crime writer and his close friend Ariadne Oliver. She appeared in 6 Christie novels alongside Poirot from 1936 to 1972 and also features in the spooky standalone novel The Pale Horse. Curiously, she did first appear in 2 short stories alongside another Christie's detective, Parker Pyne, in Parker Pyne Investigates.
It doesn't have to be a masterpiece, Ariadne.
No. Better take my time. Last one looked like it had had a stroke.
She is a middle-aged novelist herself who gets inspired by the crime she sees in her own life and then uses it as a plot for her next bestseller. One of the foremost writers of the detective and other sensational stories. Sounds much like Christie already, right?
Mrs. Drake says you're a writer, one who does the murder stories.
Yes.
You must make a lot of money out of it.
Although Agatha never mixed up in a real-life murder, perhaps that could have been a secret dream of hers. What would you say? What's more, Oliver has also created her own fictional foreign detective, Finnish Sven Jersen. By the way, the character has recently got his own TV series set in modern-day Stockholm. Have you watched it already? I'd be curious to read your recommendations in the comments.
You have a detective who's a Finn, haven't you?
Sven Jersen.
Why a Finn?
I've often wondered.
And just like Agatha, according to her memoirs, Ariadne sometimes, quite often, struggles with her own creation and contemplates her frustrations.
I've just realized I've got to cut one of my favorite ideas. Shame.
With her help, Christie was apparently generously sharing with us the curious insights into the life of a writer.
Chère Madame, you should not work, you should rest.
I have deadlines, Poirot, in sickness and in health.
Her Ariadne has authored more than 56 novels and greatly dislikes people modifying her characters. And this was the exact feeling Agatha had each time some new stage or movie director tried to exaggerate or completely erase some of the traits of her meticulously drawn characters.
So they thought they'd have a murder hunt instead. And they offered me a tidy sum to come and dream it up. Well, anything's better than writing.
Moreover, she also once grew tired of Poirot to the age of almost hating him at some point.
Are you sitting comfortably?
No.
No? Good. We wouldn't want that, would we? Not on a dark and stormy night like this one.
Wait a minute, and what about the Halloween party? Right, the holiday is approaching. It somehow gets so viral despite of your own faith or beliefs, don't you agree? Luckily, Agatha Christie invited us all to a party where we could not only dive into the universe of the fancy orange pumpkins, scary skeletons, zombies and ghosts, spiced with some down-to-earth murder, but also enjoy the company of her own persona. Well, through Ariadne Oliver, of course.
Not enjoying it, huh?
It is the subject matter, George. It is distasteful. Poirot, he has seen much evil in this world. He should not be the subject of such mockery.
The Halloween Party novel was released by Christie towards the end of her extremely fruitful career in 1969. The fictional novelist Ariadne Oliver found herself in a rather unusual setting in preparation for the Halloween evening party. The party consists of many Halloween-related activities. There is a spooky witch, girls look into a mirror to know what their future husbands will look like, the traditional supper, the prizes are granted, and the party ends after a game of a snapdragon.
Take care, don't take too much. Be not greedy in your clutch. Snip, snap, dragon.
By the way, many of the festive details are rather inaccurate in terms of the supposed time period. They might have been common in the 1960s when she wrote the novel, but were completely not spread in the 1930s, the deliberate time frame of the movie.
It's more a Christmassy thing, isn't it? Well, we Drakes always played at Halloween.
What makes it a real bone-chilling evening is the crazy murder by the end of it.
Hercule Poirot speaks?
Oh, thank God you're in.
The mystery riddle is really complicated and Oliver seeks the help of her Belgian detective friend Hercule Poirot, who would embark on the setting to unfold the dramatic chain of events. Not to spoil the pleasure for those of you who haven't watched it yet, I won't disclose the details about the crime, the victim, and the investigation process. The TV adaptation with the stunning David Suchet and Zoe Wanamaker is definitely worth watching and rewatching on your spooky Halloween evening.
At this time of year in Belgium, it is the custom to light the candles in memory of the dead, not to tell the stories macabre.
By the way, I have never seen a person who didn't enjoy the character of Ariadne Oliver. Or perhaps you are that person? Share your rationale in the comments. I guess such popularity might be attributed to a large extent to the stunning acting of Zoe Wanamaker. Much like what happened to other starring actors from Agatha Christie's mysteries movies and TV adaptations, Wanamaker did first appear in another role, this time as a leading character in the fabulous Murder is Announced episode from Agatha Christie's Miss Marple. This is the version where the key part of the female sleuth is played by Geraldine McCavan.
Well, I know one thing that's going to happen, and that's at 7:30 we'll have half the village up here agog with curiosity.
Especially the old fogies. They love a good murder.
Once again, no spoilers here. I just highly recommend you add it to your watch list if you like Zoe Wanamaker. She's doing a great acting job there too. And she also appeared in the first Harry Potter.
Oh, bless you. I do beg your pardon.
Back to Halloween. This episode is a perfect opportunity to get to know more about the writer through the actions of her tentative alter ego. Just like Christie, Oliver often gets overwhelmed by her own imagination, yet always listens carefully to her intuition and trusts her instincts. She has a rather sharp tongue and a spark of mischief, well balanced with a sense of humor and really light-hearted approach to life.
Now what? Jehovah's Witnesses?
Another perfectly matching similarity with Christine. Apart from personal traits, they both shared some particular tastes. For example, both of them didn't enjoy alcoholic drinks.
Awful. Put that in capital letters. Awful. Because, you see, it's my murder. I organized it. I don't usually drink, but Poirot gave me this for the shock.
In her autobiographical book, Come Tell Me How You Live, Agatha tells the amusing story from the first years of her second marriage, when her husband, Max Malone, was distressed to find that her appreciation of good drink, or indeed of any drink, was nil. He set to work to educate me, trying me perseveringly with clarets, burgundies, sauternes, graves, and more desperately with Tokay, vodka, and absinthe. In the end, he acknowledged defeat. My only reaction was that some taste worse than others. With a weary sigh, Max contemplated a life in which he was condemned to the bottle of obtaining water for me in a restaurant.
I'll have to keep an eye on you, Mrs. Oliver. There'll be no apples left to bob with.
My besetting sin, I'm afraid. I can't resist them.
Another funny detail, just like her real-life prototype, Oliver used to eat apples while writing her crime novels. Once she ate as many as 5 pounds straight off while composing the complicated plot of her novel, which obviously caused a stomachache. However, by the end of the Halloween party episode, she is out of them by the unfolding events.
What is the matter? Something it has upset you?
Upset me? Dear God, I shall never be able to look at another apple again.
Christie's interviewer confirmed that it was perfectly true that she often worked at her stories in a large, old-fashioned bathroom, eating apples and putting the cores on the wide mahogany surround.
Your talk tomorrow.
Well, I've been meaning to have a word with you about that, Judith. I'm not feeling too clever.
Oliver hates public appearances, which were a huge nuisance to Christie herself. She revealed how hard it was to even open her mouth and say something decent when everyone's watching. So they both tried to stay out of the limelight.
What was the subject of your talk?
My writing. Awfully pleased not to have to give it as a matter of fact. I mean, what does one say about how one writes books? You just think of an idea and force yourself to write it. What am I going to say for the other 59 minutes?
And since Agatha preferred to refrain from conflicts, she chose another method to communicate her discontent with some particular things through her proper alter ego in the books and later movies. All in all, it was not uncommon for writers of all epochs to include some supporting characters in their narratives that would express the author's thoughts and feeling on the subject. I never take my stories from real life, but the character of Ariadne Oliver does have a strong dash of myself, Christie once said in an interview. No doubt, Oliver wasn't meant to be the exact copy or a marble statue, if I may, of the writer. It seems that Christie deliberately created a somewhat exaggerated and even satirical portrait of the writer, poking fun at her own image.
You mean elephants? Sorry, I was thinking of elephants at that dinner last night.
With hesitation, I ask why.
Because the meringue got stuck in my teeth.
I see.
Those who had known Christie personally didn't describe her as an eccentric personage, while Oliver is much closer to this notion. Not exactly a parody, a portrait of Ariadne is Agatha's reflection on her own public image, which certainly reveals glimpses of her true self, yet still protects the intimate introvert personality of the author, hiding behind the curtains of the generally anticipated perception of who a bestseller author should be.
It's like a nightmare.
Or a tale of terror. Poirot, he was right, huh? Halloween is not the time for the telling of the stories macabre, but to light the candles for the dead.
Obviously, there were other Easter eggs and heroes and places that were drawn from the real life of Agatha Christie. I'll talk about some of them in my future videos, long or short. See you there. Bye-bye.
Oh, now it's 10 o'clock. It's way past most of your bedtime. It's time to go home now. Come along now. Home, home.
Wait a minute. Hercule Poirot had a wife? Well, this is actually one of the most popular questions about the famous Belgian detective that people search on Google. Indeed, the guy was about 60 when we first met him on the pages and then the screens and the mysterious affair styles, so there should have been some love affairs throughout his long life. Perhaps there is something to do with Miss Lemon? Or what about that Russian countess he couldn't forget? The love of Poirot is his most well-kept secret. In this video you will find out everything about his love affairs, facts and rumors including.
The young lady I spoke to you about, she's at table 5.
Ah. Merci.
She asked for you, specially.
By name?
By moustache.
While Captain Hastings has multiple love interests alongside the show, and Christie even married him and sent over to Argentina for a while, Hercule Poirot does always point out that he is not the one who falls in love. Of course, he was a fictional character after all, and his marital status was never directly stated in any of the stories or books in which he was featured.
In my experience, I have known of 5 cases of women murdered by their devoted husbands.
Yes?
And 22 husbands murdered by their devoted wives.
However, there are some hints and clues in the books and the screen adaptations that let us deduce this intimate part of Poirot's biography. For example, do you remember his elegant boutonnière, the lapel pin he's always wearing with his suit for every occasion? We'll learn its story in the Chocolate Box series episode, where we dive into Hercule's Belgian past, where he was a young police officer in Brussels. There we learn that he received his iconic lapel pin from Virginie Ménard. The pin was a type of a tassi-massi, a small bouquet of flowers that is carried in a paper cone. It is also called a Victorian vase, since it was invented in the Victorian epoch. Suitors brought those tassi-massis to young ladies, and the flowers symbolized various subtle sentiments. Later in the series, Poirot appears with a different set of flowers in it, yet Virginie Ménard gave him these pale pink flowers. I'm not an expert in plants, not yet perhaps, but online image identification led me to the suggestion that is something like a pink Toad flax flower here. I found that in the Victorian language of flowers, it was said to ask someone to notice your attention and affection. So it is almost universally believed that Virginie was Poirot's first true love.
I hope I haven't made things awkward for you, Hercule.
Not at all, Virginie.
This relationship, however, didn't go further, although we are shown that Poirot met Virginie once more after discussing the case with Japp. Virginie was now married and had two sons, Henri and Hercule, the latter named after Poirot himself. How romantic and poignant at the same time, right? Well, the funny thing is, no such detail is mentioned in the book by Christie. According to the writer, although Virginie did indeed invite Poirot to investigate the case of the death of her cousin, she didn't become particularly close with the detective. In Agatha Christie's realm, Virginie was a very pious woman, and at the end of the story she entered a convent and became a nun. A little bit disappointing, right? Well, this love story with Virginie and this poetic lapel pin with minute flowers, it does fit Poirot, would you agree? So this edition of the series screenwriters is indeed spot on, as if Christie wouldn't mind it herself.
A difficult smile to resist, eh, Hercule?
Yes, indeed. If you think that the young lady and not the case attracted me, you do me a wrong, Claude.
At least this understatement in what happened next is so Agatha Christie, so in line with the sophisticated standards of the epoch.
Toujours la femme, Chief Inspector. You've a phrase in English which means the same.
We just tend to say something like, mark my words, there'll be a woman at the bottom of it somewhere.
Now, however, the British actor and film director Kenneth Branagh apparently has his own say in how it all evolved for young Poirot. As we learned in his Murder on the Orient Express, Poirot keeps a photo of his deceased love, Catherine.
Ma chère Catherine. Mon amour.
Branagh's recent adaptation of The Death on the Nile brings us another recollection of Poirot's past and presents the totally made-up storyline where Poirot got seriously wounded at war, yet didn't die, but he was brutally scarred. A small caveat, all stories about Poirot are of course made up, he's a fictional character. I just mean that this particular storyline wasn't part of Agatha Christie's creation. So, during that event, we meet that very Catherine, who was Poirot's young fiancée, or even wife, perhaps. She regularly visits him in a hospital, yet then dies in a train crash. And her death is said to inspire Poirot to become a detective, because he needed something to distract him, and he has loved enough for one lifetime. And yes, his moustache is a direct tribute to that Catherine, since it was her advice to grow them to cover the scar.
Simple. You'll grow a moustache.
Well, in my opinion, that's a rather brutal invasion of Poirot's peculiar individuality, which is sadly totally in line with Hollywood's long-lasting struggles in portraying such characters. They just had to add someone from flesh and bone to define the character according to their canons. It reminds me of the deliberate extension of female roles in The Lord of the Rings. I'm not even saying that such a plot twist looks absolutely unlikable to Hercule Poirot's personality invented by Christie. And Poirot had quite a character indeed. Remember these first lines about him when we see him with the eyes of Hastings. Poirot was an extraordinary-looking little man. He was hardly more than 5 feet 4 inches, but carried himself with great dignity. His head was exactly the shape of an egg, and he always perched it a little on one side. His moustache was very stiff and military. The neatness of his attire was almost incredible. I believe a speck of dust would have caused him more pain than a bullet wound. Indeed, he even once said that he finds it really insupportable that every hen lays an egg of a different size. What symmetry can there be on the breakfast table?
Why do hens lay eggs of different sizes? It's not you, mon ami. These are two perfectly good œufs.
Not surprisingly, that a person with such a meticulous tidiness, attention to detail, a pedant, and one who sees everything and not a single faux pas would escape from his eye, well, such a man might perhaps be a rather overwhelming and insupportable companion in life. Or not? Perhaps there are women who search for exactly these features in their partners.
Well, I suppose it had to happen one day. He's really quite taken, you know.
Are you sure, Captain Hastings?
You should have seen him.
Of course, Miss Lemon was precisely the one. Poirot's no-nonsense secretary did have a soft spot for her pedantic and eccentric employer. What an extraordinary personality mixed by itself! Alas, although we might go further in inventing the supposed level of Miss Lemon's affection for Poirot, it is absolutely crystal clear that there was no mutual feeling beyond respect from both sides, the detective and his secretary.
Nothing, Mr. Poirot.
Good night, Miss Lemon.
Good night.
She was also pedant, no doubt, but the eccentric side of Poirot's character made him search for a more controversial and complex personality as an object of affection. Perhaps the ideal picture in his head was so unattainable that he hid it deep down in his mind with little hopes that one day someone would light this fire ever again. Many years and decades have passed until he met her.
Good evening, Countess. It's an honor to have you with us again. Your usual suite is ready.
When it comes to the second part of his life in England, Poirot evidently prefers to keep a low profile when it comes to anything even slightly related to the potential emotional attachment to any woman. He is often shown as an arbiter in Hastings' personal turmoils and even sorts out the unfortunate prospective match of Miss Lemon until falls in love with the criminal himself.
Hercule!
Countess!
Oh, pauvre moyen!
In the Double Clue episode, there is this Russian Countess Vera Rossakov, a very charming Russian lady, a member of the old regime. This story is one of Poirot's few encounters with the Countess, his only acknowledged love interest. Here she first appears in Poirot's life during the investigation of a jewelry robbery. Amazingly, Poirot openly admits his admiration and fondness to this flamboyant and imaginative master thief, whom Hastings described as a somewhat disturbing personality.
He wouldn't. Would he?
I don't know. I've never seen him like this before.
The most intriguing part is that Christie wrote the Countess being deeply involved in organized crime. What a woman! I tell you, Hastings, a woman who can accept defeat like that with a careless smile will go far. She's dangerous. She has the nerves of steel. It all reminded me of the paradox of Sherlock's affection for Irene Adler. Would you agree that there is something Victorian in making Poirot the brightest of the detective minds alive, the highly decent and noble soul, fall for a criminal? This sharp edge, the direct juxtaposition of their roles was very in line with an still growing passion for detective stories. It is the misfortune of small, precise men always to hanker after large and flamboyant women. Poirot had never been able to rid himself of the fatal fascination that the Countess held for him.
You are the most remarkable, the most unique woman that I have ever met. But also...
opposites.
C'est ça.
However, Poirot's admiration of Rossakov's and Christie's short story is the result of her behavior after he has identified her as a thief. Once again, Agatha didn't suggest that they went far from the deep and somewhat distant mutual affection. While in the TV series, the screenwriters decided to spice it all up and make them go on dates arm in arm in an art gallery or romantic picnic in the countryside. Barry is now calling Poirot Hercule, and in the end he lets her go away with her crimes simply because she has his sympathy with her. So not Poirot-like, would you agree? Or perhaps do we all act irrational and not like us when we are charmed and seem to fall in love? Moreover, did you have that feeling that Vera was actually a perfect fit for Poirot? Both of them have left their countries due to the tragic events of war and revolution. Both of them managed to re-establish themselves in London. Both of them are very aesthetic-loving souls, very aristocratic, even not so in the means of blood, but in their nature and attitudes. Even Agatha Christie drops a subtle hint that perhaps she touched some hidden strings of the detective's soul when, in the end, he exclaims, "A remarkable woman. I have a feeling, my friend, a very decided feeling I shall meet her again. Where, I wonder? Have you been patiently waiting for their reunion too?" Alternatively, could you actually imagine a man like Hercule Poirot, the world's most renowned detective, bothering for such a thing as a down-to-earth side of the marriage? I liked one comment at Agatha Christie's forum. Imagine how difficult it would be and how quickly it would become boring to the reader if Poirot had to stop and consider a Madame Poirot or even a mistress before dashing off at toute vitesse with Captain Hastings to solve yet another murder. "Put the dinner in the oven, my dear. I shall be back when I have solved this little matter in Egypt."
So thank you. No. The marriage, it is not for me.
Whatever it was in reality, wait a minute, it's a fiction, not reality. Well, for better or worse, Agatha Christie preferred to keep that intrigue up to the final curtain.
It's a shame you've never considered marriage, Mr. Poirot.
There were occasions, Miss Lemon, when I did have la tentation, the temptation. But now, alas, I think it is too late.
Never pause unless you have a reason for it. But when you pause, pause as long as you can. Christie and her Poirot followed that advice from Julia Lambert from Moham's Theatre to the fullest.
Poirot, he is not your love. He is Poirot.
stylish and elegant Whitehaven mansions, Poirot's legendary Art Deco headquarters, Old Cataract Hotel in Egypt, where the events of the Death on the Nile unfolded, the iconic hotel in Istanbul from the murder on the Orient Express, and other stately homes in England and abroad inspired Agatha Christie in her detective mysteries. These magnificent estates are not just settings for captivating whodunits. They are characters themselves, harboring secrets, scandals and stories that have left readers and viewers spellbound for generations. Some of them exist even today and can be visited by anyone who loves the books and their TV series adaptations. Watch this video to learn more about these iconic destinations that have set the stage for Hercule Poirot and Miss Marple. Without further ado, let's go straight to Poirot's famous headquarters in London, the Whitehaven Mansions. You may remember that after the war, Poirot became a private detective and began undertaking civilian cases. He moved into what became both his home and work address, flat 56B Whitehaven Mansions, in the 1930s. Hastings first visits the flat when he returns to England in June 1935 from Argentina in the ABC Murders Chapter 1. According to Hastings, it was chosen by Poirot entirely on account of its strict geometrical appearance and proportion, and described as the newest type of service flats. I think that I've mentioned in one of my previous videos about Poirot that the TV producers agreed that they would place all Poirot-related events in one decade, the 1930s. Well, simply for the case of convenience and consistency. Imagine how costly and obviously more complicated it would be if they tried to adapt everything with each and every episode.
The wrong address.
Monsieur Hercule Poirot, White Horse Mansions, not known at White Horse Mansions, not known at White Horse Court, try Whitehaven Mansions.
So, in the series, we are always in the 1930s, except for some rare memory recollections of the characters, of course. And so must be the exterior of the house and the interior of the detective's flat. And what was the dominant and the most modern and fashionable style back in the day? Exactly, Art Deco or Art Deco, with its refined lines, geometric forms and clean curves and forms, a sort of bridge from its Art Nouveau predecessor. Alas, there was no exact prototype of the Whitehaven Mansions in London in Christie's times, so the series producers had the liberty of picking the prototype of Poirot's HQ on their own. And they chose the looks of Florine Court, located in Charterhouse Square in London Borough of Islington to the northeast of London. This building was built in 1936 and the unusual curve of the facade had quite a practical reason, apart from being beautiful by itself. This U-plan of the building gave views over Charterhouse Square to as many rooms as possible. At the same time, in a TV documentary Being Poirot, Suchet revealed that this building was chosen not for its location, but because of its symmetry.
He chose this particular block of flats, not because of its location or anything, but because it's symmetrical, and that for Poirot was la crème de la crème.
Florine Court has 9 floors with 120 flats. They also have a swimming pool, a sauna, a gym, accessible to all residents. And yes, sometimes the flats there go on sale and could be rented, I suppose. So you have a chance to literally live inside Poirot's house.
You better watch your step, lads. This is where the famous private detective Mr. Hercule Poirot lives.
However, don't expect to find Poirot's refined Art Deco interiors and spacious floor plans. Most of the flats there are small studios, although there are some 1- and 2-bedroom apartments too. So no wonder the exquisite setting for the detective nest / office was built in film studio premises.
How would a little trip down the Nile suit you?
There's nothing I would dislike more. There's 2 things in the world I can't abide. It's heat and heathens.
Good. Then we'll go.
What a splendor it must be, this hotel, which became one of the key settings of the iconic Death on the Nile. And as opposed to what Heaven mentions, it had a prototype from real life. I was pleasantly surprised to find Christie's own recollections about this place in her memoirs. Cairo, from the point of view of a girl, was a dream of delight. We spent there 3 months and I went to 5 dances every week. They were given in each of the big hotels in turn. Indeed, the old Cataract Hotel and then just Cataract Hotel was built back in 1899 by Thomas Cook to house European travelers, mostly British, to Aswan. Apart from Agatha Christie, then a teenager, it hosted Tsar Nicholas II, Winston Churchill, Margaret Thatcher, Princess Diana, and lots of other presidents and dignitaries from across the globe. So the scenes from the Death on the Nile, where beautifully dressed guests of the highest caliber dance in its gorgeous dance hall, are not so far from reality. It is particularly soothing to know that this 1978 film with Peter Ustinov, my favorite screen adaptation of this book, was filmed precisely there at the old Cataract Hotel. Luckily, the hotel still exists today. It underwent a complete restoration and reopened as the Sofitel Legend Old Cataract Aswan Hotel. I dream of staying there one day and then going on a cruise on the Nile. Murder is not part of the program, of course, yet who knows?
Shortly I'm going up the Nile on the steamer. And you?
The same, oddly enough.
Oh. In other words, you're following one of the passengers.
No. Seulement les vacances, mon ami.
Oh?
Like yourself.
Yeah.
Yes, setting out on a voyage with the famous Orient Express, that very old one, if possible, is another point in my dream travel itinerary. By the way, that very train, the stylized version I suppose, is still circulating there. Now you have to pay about $5,000 to repeat the trip of Poirot or Agatha Christie herself, who traveled on the Orient Express for the first time in 1928. She was originally planning to travel to the Caribbean, but changed her destination after dining with 2 acquaintances who were living in Baghdad. During a layover in Istanbul, she stayed at the Para Palace Hotel. Moreover, she is said to have written part of Murder on the Orient Express there.
Well, Mr. Poirot?
Poirot.
How's that?
Poirot.
Oh, Poirot, right.
The oldest European hotel in Turkey, it was built in 1892 to host the passengers of the Orient Express specifically. Luckily, it also survived to our day. Its building is included in the Protected Cultural Heritage of Turkey. All that means you and me can actually stay in that hotel for a special occasion. Moreover, one can see that very room 411, which is now dedicated to Agatha Christie, although I'm not sure that it is indeed the room she stayed in. The room has pictures of her and many copies of her books there, and the legend says that she was writing her Orient Express precisely there. Now let's move back to England. Agatha's childhood memories, personal experiences, and even her own houses inspired the location settings of many of her murder mysteries. Take Abney Hall, a beautiful Victorian manor built in 1848. Agatha used to spend their holidays when a child and a teenager, and then visited it regularly enough, since her elder sister Madge became the mistress of this house, marrying into the Watts family. That's what Agatha told herself in her autobiography. We spent Christmas at Abney Hall with the old Wattses and their 4 children and Jack. He was Agatha's nephew, the son of her sister and James Watts. It was a wonderful house to have Christmas in if you were a child. Not only was it enormous Victorian Gothic, with quantities of rooms, passages, unexpected steps, back staircases, front staircases, alcoves, niches, everything in the world that a child could want. But it also had 3 different pianos that you could play, as well as an organ. All it lacked was the light of day. It was remarkably dark, except for the big drawing room with its green satin walls and its big windows. Abney became Agatha's greatest inspiration for country house life, with all the servants and grandeur that have been woven into her plots. The descriptions of the fictional styles, chimneys, stony gates and other houses in her stories are mostly Abney in various forms. Moreover, she wrote 2 stories from there: the novel After the Funeral and the short story The Adventure of the Christmas Pudding.
Merci, madame.
You don't like Christmas pudding, Mr. Poirot?
Au contraire, I am inordinately fond of the plum pudding.
As I've already mentioned, the hall was also used as a basis for Chimneys, a country house and seat of the fictional Marquesses of Caterham in The Secret of Chimneys. It made to the screens with the addition of Miss Marple, played by Julia Mackenzie. It was also featured in the 7 Dials mystery and the subsequent 2-hour movie from 1980, which is said to be extremely faithful to the plot. Another English country house, the Greenway Estate, went even further and not only inspired the books and later the screen productions, but actually became a setting for one of the serious episodes with Poirot.
No, you're trespassing! You can't come through here, do you understand? The youth hostel is that way. This is private land. Hop it!
First of all, Greenway in South Devon was Agatha Christie's own beloved holiday home, which she bought in 1938 as a substitute for her old family home in the same Torquay. An ideal house, a dream house, that's how she used to talk about it. Interestingly, the house was occupied by the British Army during the years of the Second World War. When I left Greenway, I felt sure that it would be bombed and that I would never see it again, but luckily all my presentiments were wrong, wrote Christie. Greenway was untouched. Well, 14 lavatories were added instead of the larder, and I had to fight the Admiralty to take them away again.
Come at once. Nass House, Devon. Need help. Urgent. Ariadne Oliver.
Greenway is featured in several books, including The ABC Murders and The 5 Little Pigs. Yet, most amusingly, you can actually see the real Christie's Greenway in the Dead Man's Folly episode, which, apart from Poirot, features Ariadne Oliver. Learn more about her, the supposed alter ego of Christie herself, in my dedicated video.
What is wrong, Mother?
Nothing's wrong. I just wanted to see if someone would come. How loudly one might have to shout. These woods are frightfully dense.
I thought you were in danger.
Certainly not.
In the TV adaptation, the house and its grounds certainly became characters on their own. The garden, the boathouse, the woods and the tennis court where Ariadne Oliver place to real clues for the murder hunt, all that was so dear to Christie's heart, so I guess this may add up an extra layer of pleasure when you decide to rewatch this episode. What's more, you can even pay a visit to the place and see it all in the flesh. The house and gardens are open to the public, being now part of the English heritage. What coincidence! David Suchet has been almost unanimously proclaimed the most impeccable and true to Christie's portrait of Hercule Poirot out there on screens. He had those properly groomed, the best in England moustache, an egg-shaped head, his manners and all the tiny bits of presence were those of the legendary Belgian detective. And yet there is one thing not visible from the first sight that unites the actor and his fictional character the most. It is their particular devotion and respect to the Christian faith, and this way special attention to its key narration, the Bible. If you are missing Hercule Poirot and his impersonation by David Suchet, then listening to his explicit hours-long narration of the Bible with his deep, melodic, unrushed voice might be the so much needed, the sweetest music to your ears.
It nourishes the nerves. You comprehend?
Suchet began recording what would then become the first full-length audio version of the Bible spoken by a single British actor back in 2013. He confessed that it was the biggest role in my life in terms of research. I love researching characters, and the Bible is the best piece of research in the world.
No, monsieur, not on. There's always still so much more to do. Clock it ticks, no? Such is the will of God.
I guess it doesn't matter that much which faith you belong to or if you are really agnostic at all. It's definitely hard to disagree with such an idea, since the Bible as a standalone piece of art, if I may put it like that, is indeed often considered to be the unrivaled collection of life wisdoms and revelations that wasn't overthrown for the many thousand years. And yet, nobody would say it's without error. I see the Bible, I hope, with a rational mind, Suchet reckoned. I do not believe it's totally inerrant. I believe it was written by human beings, inspired by God. What it gives me is a lens through which I can view the world. Interestingly, the world-famous British actor David Suchet was born in 1946 and grew up in a Russian Jewish family without religion. God works in mysterious ways, as they say. In 1986, Suchet suddenly decided to read a hotel Bible. Tell me how many times you've stayed in hotels, opened the bedside drawer, saw those Bible and then shut it down to never open again. He opened the book to the page with St. Paul's letter to the Romans and immersed himself in the ancient text. I read it as a letter that had just been sent to me through the post. By the time I got to the end, I found a world view that I had been looking for all my life.
The prodigal returns.
It was then, at the age of 40, when David Suchet became a Christian. Well, an Anglican to be precise. 3 years later, in 1989, he began filming on Poirot and got the first engagement to read the Gospel of St. John for an audio Bible, where leading British actors recorded different parts. Imagine the master tape was later lost in an office move. Already at that time, he knew that he wanted to do more.
And I knew that my statement would be accepted because I am Hercule Poirot.
As a performer, I wanted to use my voice, he says in the Bible accompanying notes. I wanted to record all the varied writings in the Bible in the hope that others might hear them. Indeed, reading aloud was one of the chief reasons why Suchet was so keen to take on the project. The Bible often speaks of hearing the word of the Lord, he says, and he wanted to know what it would feel like to listen to it as a whole, continuously, from beginning to end, in as many consecutive days as I was able. Suchet began the process of recording in June 2013, in between the final episodes of Poirot for ITV. Luckily, the recording studio was just a stone throw away from his London home. Before preparing his voice recordings, he tackled the text, book by book, reading commentaries to explore the historical context. I suppose it was like a huge Bible study. I would study at home for hours and hours. I would say 3 to 4 hours on every book before actually speaking it, so that I knew that I had underneath me a great confidence about it.
I have always tried to do my best, you know. You do believe that, Hastings?
How could I not?
Suchet was particularly invested in pitch and tone of his reading. I was very surprised at how emotionally one could read the Psalms. Each one has a high emotional pitch of its own, whether it be anger or praise, poetry, imagery. They are full of emotion, and I read them like that. One of the passages he most enjoyed reading was Jesus' talk in John after the Last Supper, where he talks about himself being the vine and you the branches. That was very lovely to read, because I did it in a very soft, conversational style, very intimate, which is how I believe it would have been done. I loved that. Other sections inevitably were more challenging. You really need a jug of ice-cold water next to you when you are reading Chronicles, to pour over your head rather than to drink, because it's the most difficult thing. Name after name after name. Suchet eventually discovered the proper key to such books. In order to understand them, one has to put oneself in the shoes of the chronicled individuals. I realized that every single name was alive, a human being, and that made it easier. All in all, he spent more than 200 hours recording every word in the New International Version Bible, and there are over 75,000 words in it. All that turned into a 78-hour-long audio version, which was released in 2014. The actor admitted that the project straightened his faith enormously, despite its challenges. The hardest passages to read were the ones on genocide, of course. But as humans, we will never fully understand God. It takes faith to accept Him and His decisions.
When the moment comes, I will not try to save myself, but humbly offer my soul to God and pray for His mercy. It is for Him to decide.
The release had an enormous success. Suchet said that he was particularly overwhelmed by its positive reception. People's reactions are so humbling, I daren't think about it, he said. Suchet's TV journey in the elegant shoes of Hercule Poirot lasted for 24 years and 70 episodes and had a global following of 600 million. When he finally completed the recording of the Bible, he confessed that it finally fulfilled his 27-year-old ambition, which began that day in the hotel room in 1986. During its first years of release, it sold more than 450 million copies. In true Christian spirit, Suchet donated the fee for his work to the charity.
Do you think God will forgive me?
Of course He'll forgive you. You're a good man. The best a fellow could know.
There is a further correlation between Poirot and the audio Bible, in that both are cover-to-cover renderings of extensive works. Well, Suchet was always vocal about his desire to film every single Christian novel and short story in the series before hanging up his moustache. So, both missions have been completed, and if you loved actor's performance in Agatha Christie's Poirot, try to listen to his thoughtful narration of the Bible, the book that opens its depth more and more with every new reading. See you in my other videos. Bye!